The story of Job, the man who loved God even while losing everything in life. The man before the trial. Long before Job became a symbol of patience and suffering, before his name was whispered in prayers and scriptures, he was simply a man. A man with calloused hands, eyes that smiled easily, and a heart that had never known true darkness. Job lived in the land of Uz, a fertile region where olive trees grew generously and flocks prospered under golden skies. He had not been born rich. His fortune had been built with sweat, wise decisions, and a generosity that paradoxically always returned multiplied. In the early mornings, before the sun painted the horizon amber, Job walked among his fields. He touched the earth with reverence, like someone greeting an old friend. He knew by name each of the shepherds who cared for his sheep. When a worker fell ill, Job would send for the best doctors and pay out of his own pocket. When there was scarcity in neighboring villages, he would open his barns without hesitation. "Why do you do this?" his wife Dinah would ask him, a woman of sharp intelligence and an even sharper tongue. "You give so much that one day we'll have nothing." Job would smile, that smile that illuminated his face like a lamp in the night. "We have everything, my love. We have each other, we have health, we have purpose. The rest is just management." They had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Job's house was a whirlwind of laughter, discussions, music, and life. His sons had inherited his generosity, his daughters, their mother's insight. Each week, they gathered in rotating feasts at each other's houses, and Job invariably would wake up early the next day to make sacrifices. In case any of them sinned in thought during the festivities, he would say. Neither to the Creator, nor to himself, would Job allow debts. The celestial wager. What Job didn't know was that his name echoed beyond earthly borders. In the celestial halls, where angels gathered before the throne, there were discussions about the nature of human faith. And among those luminous beings, there also walked the adversary, the one whose function was to test, question, provoke. "Observe Job," said the voice that moved stars. "There is no one like him on earth. Upright, righteous, God-fearing, and one who shuns evil." The adversary bowed his head, his ancient eyes scanning the earth until finding Job's figure, walking among his olive trees at dawn. "Does Job fear the Creator for nothing?" The adversary's voice dripped with skepticism. "Haven't you put a hedge of protection around him, his house, and everything he has? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have multiplied. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and you'll see if he doesn't curse you to your face." There was a silence that lasted eternities and instants. "Everything he has is in your power," replied the voice. "Only do not lay a hand on him." And thus, a wager was sealed. A wager about which Job knew nothing, but which would transform his life into ash. The day heaven collapsed. It was an ordinary day. Job had awakened with the rooster's crow, said his morning prayers, checked on the flocks. The sun shone with its usual indifference, unaware it would be witness to a catastrophe. The first messenger arrived running, with torn clothes and eyes wide with terror. While the oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing near them, the Sabaeans attacked and took them. They killed the servants with the sword, and only I escaped to bring you the news. Before Job could process this information, the second messenger arrived, covered in soot. Fire fell from the sky and burned the sheep and the servants. Only I escaped to tell you. Job's heart began to beat irregularly, but he still hadn't comprehended the magnitude of what was happening. Third messenger, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, attacked the camels and took them. They killed the servants, only I survived. And then came the fourth. The last. The worst. The man could barely speak. He fell to his knees before Job, sobbing broken words. "Your sons, your daughters, were feasting at the oldest brother's house. A strong wind came from the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house collapsed, everyone died, only I escaped." Job doesn't remember falling. He doesn't remember when he tore his robes or shaved his head. He only remembers the pain, a pain so vast it seemed larger than his own body, a pain that consumed him from the inside out like fire devouring dry wood. 7 sons. 3 daughters. In a single day. In a single instant. And yet, from the depths of this abyss of suffering, Job spoke words that would echo through the centuries. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In the heavens, the adversary frowned. The second trial. Skin for skin, said the adversary at the next celestial meeting. All that a man has he will give for his life. Stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and you'll see if he doesn't curse you to your face. Behold, he is in your power, came the response. Only spare his life. Job awoke the next morning covered in boils. From the soles of his feet to the top of his head, his skin transformed into a purulent mass of painful sores. The itching was unbearable. The pain, constant. He dragged himself to the ash heap, the mound of ashes and refuse outside the city, where lepers and untouchables gathered. There, with a piece of broken pottery in his hand, he scraped his sores, trying to find relief that never came. Dinah came to visit him. His wife, who once looked at him with love and admiration, now stared at him with a mixture of pity and anger. Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Her voice dripped with bitterness. Curse God and die. Just end it. Job looked at her, this ghost of the woman he had loved, and felt an even deeper sadness. You speak like a foolish woman. Shall we receive good from God and not also receive evil? But inside him, a question was beginning to grow. Not a blasphemy. Job did not blaspheme. But a genuine, painful question. Why? The friends who wounded. News of Job's misfortune spread quickly. 3 of his friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, came from distant lands. When they saw him from afar, they almost didn't recognize him. Was that mound of sores and ashes the prosperous Job? For 7 days and 7 nights, they sat with him in silence. And that silence was the greatest gift they gave him. Then Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He didn't curse God, never. But he wished he had never been born, that the light of that day be erased from the memory of time. And his friends, unable to bear the mystery of unjust suffering, began to speak. Surely you have sinned, said Eliphaz, with a gentle but firm voice. God doesn't punish the innocent. If you repent, everything will be restored. Your children must have sinned, added Bildad. God's justice is perfect. There's a reason for all of this. You are arrogant to proclaim your innocence, thundered Zophar. Confess your secret sins. Job listened to them, and each word was like salt in his wounds. They had come to comfort him, but what they brought were easy theologies, ready-made answers for unfathomable mysteries. You are worthless physicians, responded Job. Miserable comforters. I know I am innocent. I won't lie about myself to make your theologies work. The debate continued. Circles and circles of arguments. The friends insisted that suffering was always the result of sin. Job insisted on his innocence, but also on his right to question, to demand answers. If I could speak with God face to face, cried Job, I would present my case. I want answers. I want to understand. The answer from the whirlwind. And then, when the speeches were exhausted, when the words became empty and repetitive, something happened. The sky darkened. Winds began to blow. And from the midst of a whirlwind came a voice. But it wasn't the voice Job expected. It didn't bring explanations. It didn't offer justifications. Instead, it asked questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Who determined its measurements? On what were its bases set? Who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together? Job fell silent. Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Have you taught the dawn its place? Have you entered the springs of the sea or walked in the depths of the abyss? The voice continued, relentless, magnificent, overwhelming. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their season? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? They weren't answers. They were questions that revealed something greater than answers, the vastness of a mystery that the human mind could never fully contain. Who provides prey for the lioness? Who satisfies the hunger of the young ravens when they cry? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the does bear their fawns? Job realized something astonishing. The voice was showing that God cares. Not just about the big things, but about the details, about hungry ravens, does in labor, wild donkeys in solitude. If God cares for the natural world this way, wouldn't he also care for Job? But the question remained without a direct answer. And perhaps that was the point. Job's revelation. I spoke of things I did not understand, murmured Job, his voice broken but clear, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. And then, something extraordinary happened. Job had an insight that changed everything. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. It wasn't a physical vision. It was something deeper. Throughout his life, Job had been a good man who believed in God. But there was a distance, the distance between knowing about someone and knowing someone. In suffering, paradoxically, that distance had been eliminated. Job had found God not in the answers, but in the mystery itself. Not in the explanation of suffering, but in the divine presence in the midst of suffering. He didn't have all the answers. The celestial wager remained unknown to him. He would never know he had been a pawn in a cosmic game. And perhaps that was better. What Job discovered was something more important, that there's a difference between understanding why and trusting in whom. That true faith doesn't depend on understanding all mysteries, but on knowing the character of the one in whom you trust. The restoration and the untold story. God rebuked Job's 3 friends. You have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has spoken. And he asked Job to intercede for them, a gesture that required superhuman generosity from Job after everything they had done to him. Job prayed for his friends. And then, restoration began. Not like magic, but like a new beginning. Job had new sons, new daughters. He recovered his fortune twofold. He lived another 140 years, seeing children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. But here's the part of the story that was never told. Job never forgot. In the happy days that followed, when grandchildren played in his olive groves, when flocks grazed under the setting sun, when Dinah, who had stayed with him, smiled in her old age, Job would sometimes pause. And he would remember the 7 sons and 3 daughters who were gone. The new children were a blessing, he loved them deeply. But they didn't replace the first ones. The human heart doesn't work that way. He remembered the nights on the ash heap. The pain that had no words. The silent cry of the soul when everything seemed lost. And here's the secret Job kept. He discovered that faith that survives fire is of a different quality. It's not naive. It's not simplistic. It doesn't have easy answers. It's a faith that looks the abyss in the eyes and says, I don't understand, but I trust. It's a faith that carries scars but still chooses to love. It's a faith that knows the taste of ashes but still finds hope in the morning. In the afternoons of his old age, Job would sometimes sit with the young people who came seeking wisdom. And when they asked about suffering, about justice, about why bad things happen to good people, Job didn't offer formulas or certainties. Instead, he told them about whirlwinds and morning stars. About mysteries greater than understanding. About a God who doesn't explain but makes himself present. The greatest gift, Job would say, wasn't having everything restored. It was finding the one who is greater than all things, lost or gained. The legacy. When Job finally died, old and full of days, he left more than riches or descendants. He left a story. A story about the value of integrity when all is lost. About the courage to question without blaspheming. About friends who try to help but sometimes only make things worse. About the irreducible mystery of suffering and the inadequacy of easy theologies. But above all, he left a story about transformation. About how fire can refine without destroying. About how sometimes you have to lose everything to gain what's essential. And that story echoed through the centuries, whispered in hospital rooms, murmured at funerals, held as an anchor in personal storms. Because all of us, at some point, become Job. And when that happens, we need to know, we are not alone. Others have walked this dark valley before us. And some, like Job, arrived on the other side not just surviving, but transformed. Job's story is not about why we suffer. It's about what we do with suffering when it inevitably comes. And about the God who, mysteriously, suffers with us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and transformation. Your interaction helps us continue bringing stories that inspire and strengthen faith. May God bless you.